all of the people who I knew, who had already, I had a couple friends who had graduated in the year before me. I knew some people from conferences who had finished before me and went on to tenure track faculty positions. So I reached out to them. I reached out to my community, and just asked, what do I need to do, or what do I need to know, or what do I need to start preparing? And for the most part, people sent me their letters, right? What were their successful job search letters that they used when applying to jobs and stuff like that. So that allowed me to see how people were thinking and framing, and putting out their thinking and framing their research, teaching, and service in ways that were appealing to universities because they had jobs. So the next step that I took was sitting down and just writing, kind of free writing out everything that I thought I needed to include, right? So what am I intending on doing as a researcher following this? What are my research interests? What was my dissertation about? Or what? And that was an interesting part of the experience because I hadn't finished writing my dissertation yet. So I had to think about, I had an idea of what were the major takeaways, but I had to think about, okay, if I'm going to try to market this dissertation, how do I put that together? And that's all in the writing process, right? So what's the dissertation about? What's my research going to be? What were opportunities in teaching that I had, and how did I feel about those opportunities? And then what types of service had I done? Making sure to highlight national service, right? That was a big part of it. If you are involved with, a professional organization like AERA or like anything like that, it's good to kind of list those things as well. And as well as like publications, right? So then once I had everything written down, I went back to my friends' letters and thought about how can I condense all of that into an appropriate length, which was really difficult because you want to keep everything. You want to, you want to go into it and be like, yes, I'm a good candidate. Look at all these things I did, right? But what's really important is having a succinct letter that speaks to things that are really, really important. What helps me know that is the next step was I sent it to my advisor, sent that letter to my advisor and to other mentors who I had in the College of Education at Michigan State. So those mentors really looked at the letters and helped me sort of figure out what was important, what could be discarded, what should I highlight more, things like that. So the hard part of that was now I had all these letters, all this feedback, and the thing that people kept asking is, where's your voice, right? Because we have this notion of, in addition to telling all of the stuff about yourself in 3 pages, who are you as a person? What's your voice? What's your angle? And that felt very difficult with limited space, but it's necessary. So you also need to think about, like, who are you? Where do you see your research going? How do you approach teaching? How do you hope to be in terms of service and things like that? So yeah, that was the letter writing process. Got through that. One of the second major things I did once a year started was create a spreadsheet for all of the jobs that were coming out. And I signed up for listservs, right? So Inside Higher Ed has a listserv, Higher Ed Jobs has a listserv. I would frequently check AERA jobs, and UCA jobs was another thing that I would check really, really frequently to see what was coming out. I think Inside Higher Ed, I had a search query coming in every week, every Sunday. I would get a bunch of queries, 15 new jobs came out, 10 new jobs, and that I would sit down, sift through them, add them to my spreadsheet, which I don't mind sharing with people. If that is something people would be interested in, I wouldn't mind sharing that. And just making sure that I had an organized system for the jobs that I was interested in. And one thing that was really stressful was, I said in the beginning, I started the process in the summer, but nothing was really coming out until October. And that was a really anxious time period of between July and October, being like, oh my God, there are no jobs. I'm not gonna get anything getting out of here, right? But one of my mentors told me that most of the things you could look forward to them coming out between October and February. the bulk of the jobs are there. So even if, you know, you're searching right now and it doesn't look promising yet, hold out, you know, things October to February, that time period is where you can expect to see a lot of things, particularly November is where I saw a lot of job calls come out. So that was helpful in not feeling so anxious around what am I going to do once I graduate. Um, so talked about getting organized, talked about getting your letters together and things like that. You're also going to need to get all your materials together, whether it be transcripts, writing samples, things like that. And those are, and it's really important. What was helpful for me was making sure in my spreadsheet I had for each call what they were requiring, right? So if they needed 3 letters, put that in the spreadsheet. If they want writing sample, no writing sample, have that in the spreadsheet. Letters was the next sort of stumbling block. I had, okay, so letters are really important. Make sure that you ask your letter writers as early as you can, and remind them constantly. Stay on them constantly. Send emails constantly, because sometimes you'll be in situations where one of your letter writers is holding back your application pretty much. You know, and I feel free sharing this. Florida State had to reach out to me and say, hey, we only have 2 of your letters. What's going on with your 3rd letter writer? And that, you know, I had to reach out to that letter writer who I had informed in August that I was going to ask them to write letters, and told them each time a call came out, notified them. You know, I had to reach out and like ask what's going on with that, right? So that led me to another really important thing is have more than 3 letter writers in rotation. So you're not relying on just the 3 people or just 3 people for any one or multiple jobs and stuff like that. If possible, have 5 or 6. I had about 5 letter writers in rotation, 4 for my university and a 5th one who I worked with a lot off university. And that just helped me not ask the same people. You know, I would mix and match the combination of who I was asking for letters, not only to not overburden folks, but also if somebody had a connection at a university I was applying to, or if somebody had more knowledge of something that I've done, right? So one call was specifically about teaching. I had 2 letter writers who I TA'd for. So I made sure to tap them for any jobs that emphasize teaching, right? Any jobs that emphasize research or particular types of research, I'd made sure to tap the letter writer who I had written with or worked with on different research projects. And that just really helped those people speak more authentically to me in terms of my approach for different things. So have multiple letter writers, have them in a rotation, remind them constantly. It's really important. So after that, you know, it was sending out the applications, seeing what jobs fit different criteria, sending out my applications, putting those things together. I think I might skip this step. One thing that was also really helpful was I got the book, The Professor Is In by Karen Kelsky. It's actually really good read. I also started following her blog. And it's just a bunch of answering a bunch of questions in terms of how to approach the market, how to approach jobs, how should you marketing yourself, that were really helpful in guiding letter crafting and stuff like that. So probably should have started there, but The Professor Is In, really good book. Also, inform your mentors that you're on the job market, right? Most of the time, your advisor will know that. But if you have any other mentors who you work with through the college or in different places, make sure that you're advising them, or make sure that you're letting them know that you're on the market, because sometimes those people are also looking out for jobs. So, for example, again, the Florida State job was not one that came up in any of my searches. It was a mentor who I worked with on writing and I TA'd for, who said, hey, I have a friend at Florida State who just left, and she told me that they're opening up a line. She sent me these material. I mean, she sent me this application and stuff like that. You should try applying, right? And that was only because that mentor knew that I was on the job market, that he was like, oh, hey, I heard of this job, try applying for it. My advisor would send me jobs that haven't even showed up yet. So just inform people who you're close with, people who are mentoring you, that you're on the market. And if they see anything, send it your way, because that could be another good way of seeing where things are coming from. But it could also be a way of having, an insider perspective on what's going on, right? So I was able to talk to that mentor and say, how did his friend like their experience at Florida State? And he was able to say, she really liked it, had to move for family stuff, things like that. Gave me a perspective of what was going on. What was another thing with approaching? I think, yeah. So after that, it was just sending out applications. Once I felt I was fully organized, once I felt that my packages were done, I would just start sending out the applications. And I think one of the hardest parts of the experience was not being crushed by silence, right? So there was a point where I had 11-ish applications out, and just hearing nothing for weeks, right? And it's very easy to get discouraged in that time period, because you're sort of like, this is the culmination of everything you've been working for, and now you're not hearing back. It's radio silence. What do you do? But I think a lot of universities have a long sort of track of or a long process for reviewing and getting back to people with invites for campus or invites for job talks and things like that. And you just have to sort of trust the process, right? Also, I think the fastest university was Florida State. Between application submission to job acceptance, they were really, really fast. But there are schools that reached out to me who I had applied to before Florida State, who reached out to me for interviews after I already accepted the job, right? So that's just and that is anywhere from October to February or March that people were reaching out afterwards. I'm applying in October, not hearing from them until March. So that kind of gives you an idea of how long some of these places can take when it comes to reaching out to you, which is why I say don't get discouraged. Also, another thing that was helpful was there was a point where I transitioned from just looking at academic jobs, but started looking at fellowships, academic fellowships. So fellowships in general, like there's one at UPenn that was really neat that I applied for. And then there are other fellowships that transition to faculty positions. I think UChicago had one where the goal was to prepare faculty members to transition into tenure track lines after 2 years. So that's just to say, keep sort of an open mind looking at. Sometimes it's not just the tenure track job, but sometimes it's a fellowship that will eventually morph into a tenure track job. That could be really important to emphasize and look for in your search and stuff like that. But yeah, ultimately it's a long grind. But if you're organized, if you're timely, but really it's not going to be your timeliness, right? Because for a lot of us, I can speak for myself, but for a lot of us, the anxiousness is going to keep us on time. So the other time that you're keeping in track of is your letter writer's timeliness, right? So stay organized, stay on top of your letter writers, keep searching as often as possible, and really just send out, volume's really important. Send out as many applications for things as you can within reason. So that last part's pretty important because, or I say within reason, because for me, I knew I wasn't comfortable moving anywhere, right? Or taking any job, right? So I do say apply for volume, but I also say it's also helpful to prioritize the things that you want to prioritize in this. So is there, I'm not saying restrict your location too much, but if there are places that absolutely not, that's okay to not apply to those schools early on and stuff like that. If there's a department that, you look at it, you go online and you kind of see the makeup of the department and the research coming out of it, you have to really think, is this a place that I think I can go thrive, create good connections, have good collaborations? And if it's not the case, Do you really want to put yourself in a position as a new person coming out in an environment that may not be favorable to you? Also, once you start getting interviews and once you start getting your job talks, also go back, make sure that you're consulting your mentors again, make sure you're consulting people who have done this before, because lots of things come up when it comes to negotiating, how to approach your job talk, what you should be looking for in a department, and really understanding how you, the scholar, is going to fit and thrive in another place. So I think it's really important to look at, the schools that you're applying to, what's sort of around them, what type of centers are there, what type of initiatives are going on there, what type of research is coming out of there, because all of those things are just going to improve your quality of life as a faculty member. So yeah, that was kind of my process, starting with relying a lot on friends and faculty members for help and stuff, and then just really moving through the process and trying to remain as organized as possible. So, and that was helpful for me. So that's all I've got for now.
Wonderful. I mean, I think that was a lot of information, a lot of really useful information there. I did have one kind of quick follow-up question. So I think I individually have a little bit of a unique kind of view, being on the current faculty search committee at cover letters. So I know at the very beginning you talked about cover letters and the importance of it and stuff. I'm wondering if you can maybe expand upon do's and don'ts of cover letters, because I see just in this context for me, I see wonderful cover letters and I see less than wonderful cover letters. So I'm just curious if you can maybe expand upon that from your experience, of what to do, what not to do.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that came up so I talked about that when I first did that draft, and I wanted to include a lot of stuff. And I think one of the things that I didn't do well in the earlier drafts of my cover letter was fully explaining my dissertation research and how that research connected. There was no connective tissue between my research, my teaching, and my service, right? So it was almost like I had just thrown on a page, I did this, I did this, I did this, I look at this, this, and this, and I'm interested in all these different things. Please hire me, right? And what was more useful was saying, okay, I'm interested in this specific topic. Here's why I'm interested in this specific topic. And here's how I see it relating across different aspects of myself. Whether it be, so for me, the narrative came from, I worked in schools as a core member for an organization called City Year. That was a big impetus for me going into grad school and stuff like that. That experience also relates to my dissertation research, which focuses on external organizations. When I was talking about teaching, I connected it back to these were classes on both policy and other things that are related to sort of these topics that I'm interested in. So I would be interested in teaching anything related to those sort of things. And then when I talked about service, it was all interconnected interconnected with my research. Because one of the things that I think is really important is when most faculty positions, when they're hiring you, unless it's at a teaching institution, stuff like that, and it depends, they're interested in who you are as a researcher. They're interested in your clear understanding of your work, your clear understanding of the direction of your work for the future, and your clear understanding of how your work fits in the department or could potentially fit in the department. So I think that your work part is so important because at the end of the day, you've been working on your PhD, you've been working on this research for close to 4 to 5 years now, right? So if you can't write compellingly about it and can't make it fit, that might not send good signals to those who are looking on the committee and stuff like that. Yeah, I think so. Throwing everything on there without thinking about how it all connects is a big no for me. I also think so this is, some people have done this differently. I used headers to explicitly speak about research, service, and teaching. For me, that allowed for clear transitions between the different sections. But I also made sure that thematically they were connected still, even though I was creating that separation. But I just wanted to really emphasize, this is who I am. This is where I'm looking in terms of research. This is how I've approached teaching and hope to approach teaching in the future. And this is how I feel and care about service and stuff. And that was just really important to highlight. And I think that organization was helpful in sort of guiding the committees into seeing, okay, we can place his work in each of these buckets easily because he clearly articulated or outlined each of these things with sections and stuff. And another thing I think, so to me, service is personally important, extremely important, because I think it's really a big part of it. I was instructed to not emphasize service as much.
Dr. Gilzene, can you elaborate on what you mean by service?
Oh, yes. So, that's a good question. So service, I had it defined in 3 different ways, where I had service to my university. I served on the Black Graduate Student Association for Michigan State University. I served on the graduate student government. So that was service to the university. I also volunteered in the community a lot. So I would emphasize service to community through educational organizations and educational partnerships. And then service to the field was I was on committees for AERA and for UCEA, which are, AERA is a major conference, UCEA is the Conference in Educational Leadership. And I served on committees for all of those things, as well as I still am, but was at the time a junior editor for a journal in the field and stuff like that too. So that was service that I was emphasizing, saying like, I've done these sort of things, but not to spend too much time on that, I think was important as well, that research and teaching were really important to highlight and emphasize.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Alex, about the cover letters?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how much work did you do to kind of get to know the departments that you were applying to, and how much should you explicitly kind of try to connect who you are as a researcher and teacher with like who they are as a department? Is that part of the cover letter, or is that something you prepare for the interview with, and how do you go about finding out that information besides just looking at the website?
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I did a deep dive so I remember particularly 2 of the schools I applied to were the University of Toronto and Georgia State. And both of those schools have centers that explicitly speak to educational leadership, urban education, things like that. So while I was talking about my dissertation research, I made sure to mention, by the way, the whatever center for urban educational studies looks primarily at this problem. My research is also interested in these types of problems, right? Sort of talking about the ways that my research intersects with that. So I would love for the opportunity, so being a part of your institution would be an opportunity to partner meaningfully with that organization or with that center to continue doing this type of work. So it was really important for me to go in and spend some time on websites or, wherever it was, combing through what was available, getting really familiar with not only the department, but what does the university do in terms of research, whether they have centers, whether they have organizations, whether they have, I know here I talked about the fact that there's a school, right? The North Florida schools and stuff like that it would be really interesting for me to partner with and stuff like that, because so much of my work is school centric. So I think it can't hurt to do a deep dive and kind of highlight where the intersections of your work and what the school's already doing are.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other kind of follow-up questions, clarification questions for Dr. Gilzene?
Yeah, I want to first of all thank you, Dr. Gilzene, for this really informative, session, and also for highlighting the fact that the cover letter can be so specific to the university that you're applying to, so it's not just a copy paste for everybody and then you just send it. I think the kind of effort that you have sort of emphasized that we need to put into the cover letter is really, really important. I just wanted to, because I'm obviously not very familiar with the system of recruitment here in the US. Who exactly is a letter writer? You mentioned that you got in touch with 5 letter writers. So I would just like to know what exactly you mean by a letter writer.
Yes. So as one part of the process, you're going to be asked at multiple universities for at least 3 recommendation letters. By default, well, at my institution, by default, your advisor was one. And it would, honestly, your advisor will probably be the only writer who writes for every single call, because it would not send, well, I was told, and it could be completely different, but it wouldn't send a good message that you didn't have somebody who kind of oversaw your entire process, writing at least 1 letter for you. So that was a letter of recommendation from my advisor. And then I had other faculty who could fill in as my other 2 recommendation letter writers. And that's what I mean with that, is like having outside of your advisor, trying to have like 5 on rotation. And they could be people who you've TA'd with, people who you've researched with, people who you have mentorship relationships with from other institutions, people who you've taken. So, I made sure to identify, I had my advisor, 1 faculty member who I wrote a paper with, 1 faculty member who served as an external mentor for me at the University of Oklahoma, 1 faculty member who oversaw my GA work, another faculty member who oversaw my department as a unit, in terms of like, she managed the GAs in general, and then we were assigned to a specific professor for our GA hours. So I had both of them, my direct GA supervisor, and then the person who helped organize sort of GA opportunities and stuff like that. And then who was my last one? And the last one was another professor who I had worked on a number of projects with. So those were the people who I called on, were people who I TA'd with, worked on projects with, who I served as a GA for, because all of them could speak to the different facets of my experience or abilities through like research, teaching, and through GA work and stuff. So yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question. I don't really know how to put the question. I will just put it the way I think everyone will understand me. How much do they place emphasis on applicants knowing qualitative and quantitative data analysis?
Yes, I think it is dependent on the job. So some jobs will explicitly mention, we are looking for a quantitative methodologist. We are looking for somebody experienced in qualitative methods. When they don't specify that puts more of the gamble on you to sort of try to emphasize your competence with both, right? And that's a hard one. So I prefer when a job outright states, we're looking for qual, we're looking for quant, because that tells me how to write my research part of the application and what to emphasize, right? So in jobs that we're asking for quant, I would go into more detail. I mean, asking for qual, I would go into more detail about my dissertation. And saying exactly what I did as a part of that talk. For jobs that were asking for quantitative, I would more so emphasize papers that I've written that leaned on quantitative methods more, as a means of like making that connection. And when jobs didn't specify, I kind of just gambled and was just like, I'm just going to talk about the dissertation and see what happens. But usually a job will tell you directly in their call.
One quick, sorry, just a follow-up about the letter writers. Is it not advisable to have people write recommendation letters who are not in academic faculty positions? I think everybody you mentioned were faculty of one kind or another, but like if I'm working closely with, for example, like consultants and people who work in development organizations, would it be appropriate to have one of them write a letter, or should it really be somebody within the kind of academic world?
No, I think that's absolutely fine. I do think if you're going to do that, your other two, but for me, so if you're going to do that, your other two writers have to be academic if you're applying for academic jobs.
Okay.
But I think that's fine. Yeah.
All right. So thank you for all that. That was incredibly in-depth, very useful. But we're gonna shift to Connor. So Connor has, so I mean, you're not finished. You're writing your dissertation right now, correct? So kind of has a job while you're kind of finishing that up. So maybe talk a little bit about how you found that job. But I think it's important for you to maybe also talk about like the grant you received to be able to have the job. I think that's an important thing for you to talk about as well. So maybe, at least mention kind of what that is and how that helped you, and then talk about like how you found the job and what you're doing right now.
I actually prepared a quick little presentation also. And so I'm just gonna share my screen and talk over it as we move on through. And so, yeah, I did just want to give some context to, why I started job searching my third year of my PhD anyways. Kind of like focusing on creating a good CV and going through exactly what the steps were. For me, I was looking for a quantitative job, but I think the process itself is probably going to be pretty similar if you're looking for a more qualitative one. So the pandemic and a lack of advanced coursework gave me a lot of time to work on independent research. And so I had 3 directed independent studies really by the time last fall came around. And so I studied missing data analysis. I used physics teacher policy to write for the AURA conference. It wasn't accepted. That's fine. That's fine. And then I did a advanced quantitative methods course in which I pretty much spent the entire semester writing and editing my proposal for the AURA NSF dissertation grant. And so during that same year, my goal was really to apply to Harvard's Strategic Data Project, which is a program that Harvard's Center for Education Policy Research has each year. They have a cohort of, I think it's around 20 either PhDs, grad students, even just like professionals that have been in education policy for some time that do hard quantitative analysis. I was focused on it because they were like, hey, apply for this, and as long as you get through our process, you have a guaranteed $70,000 to $90,000 paying job throughout the program, like starting the fall of the year after you apply. And really that kind of fueled my, addiction to applying for jobs, I would have to say, because you set up okay, I don't need to go forward actually. You set up your resume, you have it looking all good, and then they give you a test, a performance task after they've interviewed you. And then after that, you're interviewed again, as long as you get through these consecutive layers. But starting out, really, you should have a good CV. Your CV should be easily updatable and easy to read. And this goes back for both in academia and in the real world. You want people to know what you've been doing, and it should be up to date, really relatively easily. So coming from my physics background, I learned how to program in LaTeX. And of course, it comes with templates, so it's super easy. And the coding itself works itself out, and you get a beautiful PDF that's easy to read and has no problems. You can use whatever you like to edit your CVs, but I always keep to things that save me time. And I use a website called Overleaf, which compiles and prints the PDFs really easily. Then as far as the job search goes, I found most of the jobs that I've applied for in 2 places, and that's Twitter or LinkedIn. in the same way that Florida or the College of Education has their listserv and they share job postings, professors post them way more frequently on the internet, on Twitter. And I think I'm just to be completely clear and honest, I have applied to about 14 jobs on the academic job market this year. So I know all about that, the stress of waiting for responses from universities. And so, but particularly I found the Jane Family Institute Fellowship and different summer internships, postdocs, and industry positions through Twitter. The really interesting thing about the Jane Family Institute Fellowship was I found one that they were sharing, applied to it, and then through that process, they were like, actually, you don't seem like you'd be a good fit for that one. Why don't you fill out the application for this other one that we're also running simultaneously in a couple of weeks? And that way you can use, and so I applied for that, and I think I go over it in a couple slides. LinkedIn's job search is always great, and you can obviously have them send you updates on any academic or non-academic positions. I have two kind of main strategies. That's cast a wide net, and if there's no job out there that fits your skills, make a job for yourself. So I was fine with leaving Florida. I was living in a really shitty apartment in Tallahassee anyways. And so I was fine with leaving. And so I applied across the country and even across the globe. These are just a portion of the different job titles that I applied for. I was, for some reason, going through a phase where I wanted to work at the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. And they are hiring social scientists all the time. And honestly, you should try. Just send them a resume and make them do the work. So I applied for a statistician at the IRS, a bunch of different agencies and firms. Specifically, the Texas Education Agency is where I actually got the job. And that position, I really didn't know what it would entail. And so I've learned so much just in the last 5 or 6 months that I think the willingness to apply for things that you don't know if you're qualified for or not is absolutely something that you should do. So one of my second favorite things that happened this year was in January, I knew of an organization in my hometown called JPEF, the Jacksonville Public Education Fund. And I had seen that they'd been doing work in my district for a while now. But most importantly, that they didn't actually have like any research arm doing really good quantitative data analysis. And so I emailed the president of this small nonprofit, and I was like, hey, here's my skills. This is what I'd like to do. Is there, perchance, are you in the market for a director of research or something like that? And I had a really great dialogue with her. And ultimately, near May, they did offer me a job. However, it was around $20,000 less than what the Texas Education Agency was offering. And so I had to decline, even though it was going to be working in my hometown. It's one of those things. And then the other one, this is probably my third favorite thing to do, is to use other social networks to apply for positions that might not exist. So specifically, I use the Strategic Data Project. They have, I think, close to 15 or 14 cohorts of education policy analysts that learn from them. And all of the information is on their website of who's worked there and the different steps or where they are now. I use LinkedIn and found with them and just sent them an email saying, hey, I applied for the Strategic Data Project. I got through to the second to last interview where they decided to go a different way, but I still have the skills that could be very useful to you. And so essentially I created a map of where I wanted to live and where I might want to work, and found the people through that organization and just said, hey, hope you consider me. And I got a lot of great feedback of just like, oh, thanks. Actually, we just finished hiring some other person. You were a bit too late, but thanks anyways, and we'll keep your application on file. And so I say never underestimate being bold and reaching out for what you want. A bit of advice, do better at tracking your the different jobs that you applied to. I kind of quit halfway through because I started getting interviews, and basically what I'm saying is keep track of all the different places you've applied to, because this is only a third of the applications that I actually sent out. And as you can tell, it really looks disorganized. But, you know, I applied for director level positions, for senior level positions, and really the worst thing that they could do is say no or offer you a position that's nearby. And then I wanted to kind of talk about, so the interview process for most of these places that I'm talking about are you submit your application, they call you, they say, hey, are you the person that submitted this application, and who are you? Do you actually still want to work here? And then if they like you, then they'll generally ask you to do a performance task. And so these are the performance tasks I did, one with the Strategic Data Project, one with the Jane Family Institute. In February of March this year, I applied to the Office of Program Policy Analysis and Government Affairs at Florida, or at the Capitol, and the Education Trust Midwest. And then in April, I applied at the Education Pioneers and Texas Education Agency. Both the Education Pioneers and Strategic Data Project are more formal, and they've existed for quite some time. And generally, all of the performance tasks relate around cleaning data, analyzing data, and then reporting on it. So for example, the Jane Family Institute was exploring the implementation of income sharing agreements. And so they sent a data set from iPads with the task, and the task was just clean the errors, make sure that you give a high level overview. And then this one was really difficult because they took your, they asked you to make a model and then predict the values for Gen Z and then report on it. Jane Family Institute selected another candidate with more experience in ISAs. And actually, just last week, I interviewed someone who was a director at the active branch of the Jane Family Institute to work with me in my current position. So you know, it's a small world, but it's pretty cool. The easiest one was absolutely Education Pioneers, and they just gave me a set of state scores and asked me about the average score of a specific school. And then they invited me to go on through their interview process, which was essentially like, hey, come meet who you're going to work with. But I had already accepted the Texas Education Agency job. And so, you know, the performance task generally took between 2 to 6 hours to complete. And then once you're on that, if you pass that, then you're on the short list. And they interview you for things like team culture and fit. And if you guys ever want to see the actual performance task, I have them saved on my Google Drive, and I will gladly share them with you. And I think to mirror what Dr. Gilzene is saying, don't get discouraged. Track the jobs that you applied for, and I like the concept of just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. You know your career, you know what you've been doing, and you should know how to sell yourself on it. You know, if there's some place near where you grew up that is doing education policy work, tell them, hey, I understand this context, I want to work here. What can you do for me? And finally, be a free rider on other social networks, whether that's Twitter, listservs. Just continue to expand your social networks, your reach. And that is the end of that. So if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer.
So I guess I'll just kind of ask a brief question, because this was something that I didn't actually fully understand at the beginning. And because I heard some people talking about like, oh, when you're done with classes, go get a job. I was like, okay. So that in order to do that, that requires like funding, because you lose your assistantship. So can you talk a little bit about your funding, because it's a little bit unique, I feel like?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a quite a unique experience. So in after I passed my what's it called? I forgot the prelims. That's it. I was like, comprehensives. That's not it. We don't call them that. Prelims. Once I passed my prelims, it was this February, and it was kind of shocking to me because a month later, my advisor would quit, and so I had to struggle for a new graduate assistantship, or I had to find a job, one of the two, because I found out my funding was ending. And so as I was searching for a job, ultimately, I found out that I got the ARA NSF dissertation grant. And so I had somehow both gotten a job and gotten a way to pay for my dissertation year. And I'm not one to pass up a difficult time. And so I decided to accept both. And so I've now been working this Texas job since May. And then I have been working on my dissertation nights and weekends to get everything done, as well as to pay for the dissertation credit hours that, you know, somehow require thousands of dollars to afford. Did that answer your question? I'm not sure it did.
Yeah. I think it's just like, because I didn't get it at first. And then I think it was actually Darren was talking about, you know, oh, get a job after you finish classes, you know, don't stick around. It's like, okay. So I didn't really know about, but then I kind of realized like I still have to pay for everything and I would lose any funding I would already have if I left. So it's kind of an important, like, I just kind of wanted you to talk about it briefly because I wasn't aware of how to do that when I first heard about it.
What I found out that was really interesting is apparently FSU, so the director of the program, the ARA NSF grant program, I've had quite a close communication with them because trying to get data from the Department of Education in Florida is like pulling teeth. And so in a recent conversation, he's like, now you have on your budget that to pay for your own tuition. And apparently when the grant does come through, the institution itself generally in other graduate students' cases have given dissertation grant winners a break on the tuition. So like, but I've had to pay mine and I'm like, it's so complicated that I'm like, maybe I'll have to send I don't know, somebody an email saying, hey, can I not pay this, please? That way I could continue on. But it is definitely, if anyone wants the dissertation grant, I have like a little folder of like what I did and how I applied for it that I can also feel free to share. I don't know if it's done yet as the deadline is passed yet, but the ARA NSF dissertation grant takes large data sets that are federally funded and use them to, you know, have innovative research projects. And I think right now it's still $25,000, but they could maybe raise it in the future. Who knows?
It was due 3 weeks ago, I think. So like Michael Paul was frantically finishing her submission a couple weeks ago, but it is passed.
I should reach out to her, see how it went for her.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Connor or for Dr. Gilzene?
Yeah, Connor, you shared two software applications in the beginning for developing a good resume, right? So how are they different from using good old Word?
The one way is, I haven't used Word in a while, but I know it has the tendency to, if you put an image in there, that it'll mess up the formatting immediately. This is my workaround, having to deal with that I just type in, CV entry, whatever the new topic is, and then I move forward. But Word works fine.
I would not recommend using LaTeX.
If you don't know it, don't use it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, right. I can share one thing about the. So I'm on the academic job market this year. I don't think I'm supposed to be. I think I'm just like hard-headed, and so I've already decided that I was going to be. And because Dr. Ayatollah was like, Connor, you're a year early. What are you even doing? And I'm like, I wanted to, there are already 14 tenure track positions available that I've applied to, which means, I might not get any one of these. I might not get a call back for any of them. However, I would never know if I didn't apply. And I think that's my attitude. I think everyone should have is just do it. Just do it. The Nike slogan.
Yeah, like you said, the worst that can happen is that they say no. So you can't really do more than that. So how do you maintain your motivation to work on your dissertation now that you have a job and everything? And that is also a lot of work. So how do you maintain your motivation as well as the balance of both these?
That is an absolute excellent question. I'll be honest. It waxes and wanes. It's one of those things that I know that I need to get it done, and I know that not only that, I'm interested in getting it done. I think that's the key part, is you have to be passionate about your subject, and exploring teacher retention and recruitment in this policy that I'm looking at. I've already put so much time and effort into it that I can't stop looking at the issue. Like, it keeps me up at night thinking about it and how I can go about solving the various, both like technical issues of coding the what my regression ultimately will be, because it's taking a different approach than it's a weird approach, is what I'm saying. My design is a very weird quantitative approach, and both the technical issues of that and then the actual issues of getting the correct data and making sure that everything, all the assumptions of my project work, it's just a mental puzzle that I find fascinating.
What is your approach?
What
is your approach?
So I'm using multinomial logistic regression with binary outcomes and in a regression discontinuity framework. And so it was actually really cool because the literature that I was looking at was regression discontinuity with binary outcomes. And so you had, maximum likelihood estimation techniques along with because regression discontinuity usually only works for linear outcomes, the statistical backing that I need is already complex. And so I'm like, can Stata even do this? No, it can't. I got to use R.
Really? I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And you have to check our problem sets too, so that must be a problem on top of that.
I gotta be honest, this is probably my biggest mistake, was deciding to also TA while working this job and writing my dissertation all at the same time. I am actually nuts. Do not do what I did.
We appreciate your honesty, Connor, because I was starting to wonder if you were superhuman.
Oh, thank you. No, not superhuman, just, functioning off of between 5 to 6 hours of sleep.
All right, so we're right bumping up against 7 o'clock. So unless there are other kind of last questions, I just want to take a couple seconds here and thank both Dr. Gilzene and Connor for kind of joining us tonight and just talking about their experiences. I wanted it to be just pretty informal and just kind of hear what you have to say. All of us are either approaching the job market, on the job market, or trying to delay the inevitable stress that will be the job market. So, thank you again for your time and, your advice and expertise.
Just to throw this out there, that state education agencies are hiring like crazy. There's such a shortage of workers at the Texas Education Agency right now. I'm just like, how are we getting anything done, guys? So I throw that out there and keep your eyes open on those positions.
Gotcha. All right. So, yeah, thank you again. This was being recorded, so we will post it. Amber, Kate, do you have any kind of last thoughts to add before we all log off?
No, we just really appreciate your time, Connor and Dr. Gilzene. I'm glad we had a number of people join us, and I know there's others who were really interested to join but couldn't because of scheduling. So we'll share the recording with them if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I just want to thank you. This was really, really useful. And like Kate said, I just wish more people could be present here and ask more questions perhaps, but then they can watch this remotely. I'm sure they'd be interested too.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
And definitely, I don't know, send my email, I guess, along with the recording.
Yeah.
I will be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, same here. Happy to answer any questions and provide
you.
material.
Thank you. And Dr. Gilzene, if you could share the spreadsheet also, with you mentioned.
Yes, I'll send an email over with my spreadsheet as well. Yes.
And Connor, can you send me all the problem or the
You got it.
all the tasks and all of that stuff? We just finished multinomial logics in MLE, I don't know, this week. We just finished it. It's difficult.
I'm sure you'll get it.
All
right, y'all. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.